Good morning, everybody, and welcome to Crew Inland Empire Coffee Break. Today, we are talking with Cody Cannon from Colliers International. Cody Cannon and Colliers International are a platinum corporate partner for Crew Inland Empire this year. We thank them for their support of our chapter continuously. And also, I will say that Naomi is going to be on our co-chair for membership coming up this year in 2021, and we're very excited about that. So we appreciate the support that we get from Colliers. So let me tell you a little bit about Mr. Cannon. So as an executive managing director for Colliers International in the greater Los Angeles region, Cody Cannon provides guidance and leadership for the sales professionals and support staff across 10 Southern California offices. With more than 15 years of experience in commercial real estate, Cody has a broad background in brokerage business, and including 6 years spent managing his own boutique firm. Throughout his career, he's represented private clients, general partnerships, LLCs, property syndicators, developers, institutional investors, and real estate investment trusts. Prior to joining Colliers, Cody served as a regional manager for Marcus & Millichap, where he led a sales force of more than 60 commercial real estate investment brokers and loan originators in the Inland Empire and Los Angeles. In addition to recruiting and coaching new and experienced agents, through Brokerage and Continuum, he developed programs and strategies to ensure the overall success of the region. So ultimately, Cody understands the brokerage business and about the people and is dedicated to supporting and developing professionals to build their own business and service their clients. Cody is also a board member for Crew Inland Empire. He served on our board in 2019, and he continues to support our chapter in leadership and coaching roles through our professional development series. So thank you, Cody, for joining us today.
My pleasure. Thank you. Great to see everybody. I know it looks like we've got a kind of a more of a roundtable discussion here, so this is good. We can make it a little more intimate, but it's great to see many of you that I haven't seen in almost a year because of all this. So good to see your faces. Hope you're all doing well.
It is nice to see everybody. It really is. I wish we were all in a room together or doing this in person, but Zoom has become our new friend in life, right?
That's right.
So Cody, let's talk a little bit about the state of the market today. What are you seeing? What is the current state of our market right now from the Colliers perspective?
Yeah, it's obviously no surprise. This has been a challenging time for so many people, economically and in the commercial real estate space specifically. It's had a dramatic impact in not only how we live and operate. And it sounds like this isn't, it looked like about the end of the third quarter, we were kind of getting out of this, and now it's like we're moving backwards, right? And so unfortunately, it looks like there's going to be some more challenging times ahead is what it looks like. But overall, and then this is, there's obviously specific property types within commercial real estate that are maybe doing a little bit better and kind of stronger than others for a variety of reasons. I don't think it's any surprise. The industrial market continues to be extremely strong, and specifically in the Inland Empire, which is arguably the hottest industrial market in the country with rates. Even this next year, we're projecting rental increases, which was crazy to say, 3 years ago. And with the rents continuing to rise and absorption is continuing to be positive and low vacancy rates there, and this is all driven from not only the e-commerce demand, but geographically just the location of the Inland Empire, how it is strategically from the ports and the interstate arteries to get all of our consumer goods across the country. Some of the other product types are obviously having more of a challenge, and we can dig into that here a little bit more about office and retail and some of the other property types.
That's really unique how you guys are looking at that and the information that you have. That's very helpful. So do you think that the presidential election will affect our real estate market? Does it matter who our president is?
Yes.
Are you seeing that from a corporate level?
Yes and no. Additionally, yes and no. I think more yes. And that's more so just based upon more kind of global fiscal policies and how that's going to impact, business owners. And like anything, it either trickles down or trickles up depending on the approach of those policies. And so recognizing that, we've seen this in states like California, where the tax rate is high, the cost of doing business is high, but there's a reason for that, right? It's arguably a great place to be and live, and a lot of people want to be here because of the climate and because of the business and everything else. However, we're also seeing and hearing a percentage of businesses recognizing that the cost of operating and the cost to provide for their employees is getting to the point where it may not make sense fiscally. And when there's other states out there that are incentivizing businesses to come out that way, we're seeing some of those big businesses, even in the tech industry, specifically in the Silicon Valley, which is the most expensive place to live and everything else. We're seeing a lot of these businesses start to look at a state, and because there's other more business friendly opportunities.
So you see principals leaving the state of California, really?
Principal, yes and no. And so I've seen when I say that, like, there are principals that are maybe staying here, but they're looking and they're investing in out other states to chase yields in better states, right? I mean, you can look at, and there's kind of, it really depends on what the investment strategy is, but if you're chasing yield, you're not really seeing that in Southern California. But that's also a reflection of, because the demand is so strong for the most part. This is kind of generally speaking, right? This is thankfully we live in a market that's had historical appreciation and demand, and you've got a significant population with the diverse commerce and business opportunities. And so because of that, we have a history of appreciation in California, and that's not the same in most mid markets or in the middle of the country, and even in the South for the most part. And so if you're looking long term, it would be hard to argue that California is not a great place to park your money. But depending on the investment need or strategy, we're seeing a lot of investors realizing that they can't get the types of returns they can't get in other states because of growth in these other states. And so they're moving their money and they're taking their capital elsewhere, coupled with just kind of the overall political environment. We just got through this election, and more specifically speaking about a lot of the ballot measures that would have potentially significantly impacted commercial real estate owners and tenants and landlords and operators. And thankfully, some of those measures didn't pass, but that was worrisome. And a lot of investors seeing that, knowing that that's probably not going to go away, that'll probably be on the next ballot and the next ballot after that. At some point, there may be a possibility of some of those passing. That definitely impacts. And what I think a lot of people don't realize is initially that may impact the landlord or the investor, the owner of a particular property or commercial real estate. Well, generally speaking and historically speaking, we've seen that tax ramification will just be passed down to the tenant, and that tenant's going to pass that down to the employee. And so this is that kind of trickle down impact where it ultimately does affect all of us. And so it's concerning. And I guess to answer your question, I think going back to the kind of more national question, yeah, I mean, I think you look at least the proposed policies of the new, I guess it's still a contested election, but let's assume that Biden is elected our president. You look at some of the historical decisions and policies passed by he and some of the others that he's proposed as cabinet members. It's going to have it's a completely different swing from where we're coming from in the current presidential climate. So that's going to have a significant impact. It's going to have a significant impact on our economy, our global economy. That's such a bigger discussion because there's so many variables that go into the global economy and how it trickles down to commercial real estate specifically. But it's a totally different approach and I guess perspective of the purpose of government and how we're taxed and how we operate. So it will definitely have an impact upon commercial real estate.
We hear that as well, and we're starting to see that, I think, a little throughout this year, especially as we were slowing down, toward the fourth quarter of the year. So definitely, I agree 100% with what you're saying in there. So tell us a little about Colliers. How is your brokerage company different from other firms?
Yeah, thank you. It's a good question. So what I've really enjoyed about being in this firm is I think two things, and there's, I mean, all the firms out there, I say at least the biggest firms, the top firms, the top 5, the top 10, I'm intimately familiar with and have great respect for all of them. There's some very successful firms out there and great brokers and great people in all those companies. What it differentiates Colliers amongst all those, in my view, and this is really kind of how we pride ourselves, is the fact that we've been very entrepreneurial or enterprising. And that's what I mean by that is many of the firms that are really built out are very management heavy, very top heavy, very limited geographically and kind of boxed in. And meaning that from a broker's perspective, you have kind of a limited space that you can operate in. And then whether that's geographically, whether that's product type specific, whether that's also plus like layers and layers of management, right? And that top heaviness, and that it's been reflective in an environment like COVID, where those companies have had to shed a lot of personnel and had to do a lot of layoffs and furloughs, and we've seen how that's impacted the industry overall. Coupled with a lot of those companies that have taken on significant debt during the last 10 years, and kind of that risk investment, gamble, it was paying off in an economy that we've had an incredible economy over the last 10 years. But when there's an economic shift like the COVID impact, and then the tide goes out, so to speak, and then we can see who's left without any swimsuit on, and we see how they really look financially. There's been a lot of shakeup in a lot of the big firms. What's unique about Colliers is two things. So I think the culture, and I'm a huge proponent of culture. And what I mean by that is when we look at brokers, and we look at brokers as kind of the tip of the spear, they're the revenue producers and generators for the business. Our goal is to find the right brokerage team, and this is where the culture fit comes in play. They have to be a good human being, and have a great brand both in their marketplace and then in their office, or in the office. And that's it. And as opposed to trying to just flood the market or a specific sub-market with brokers in that market, we want to find the right broker and build around that individual. And so we can get very customized, and this is where the kind of the entrepreneurial side comes in. Is there's in the greater Los Angeles region, that's LA, Orange County, Inland Empire, we have just about 200 brokers, all different property types, and I probably have 190 different really customized agreements or contracts with those brokers, as opposed to some of the other firms where it's just kind of a boilerplate and every broker kind of fits into a box. And there's other firms that will throw 20 brokers in one space, and they like them to compete, and that's great. It does create a competitive environment. What I think is unique about Colliers is we want to find the right people and not necessarily flood the market with 30 brokers. We want to find the right team and build around them. I believe that creates a better culture. And so I'm a huge proponent of that. And going back to that kind of entrepreneurship or, that enterprising approach, is we can really build my role as a business partner with the brokers. And so we sit down and we look at what do they want to accomplish. And if it's a business plan that we can both get behind as a business partner, then we'll support it. And so we have really unique kind of teams, all with different structures. And just like humanity in and of itself has different personalities and different approaches. And the neat thing about this industry is that I've seen brokers from all different backgrounds, all different walks of life, be very successful in this business. And so this business should reflect the communities that we work and operate in. And personality type isn't necessarily a driver to being successful in this business, is your ability to connect with people. That was a long answer to that question.
So I have seen you do this with new agents and, new people coming into our industry. And so you do really get to know the people that you work with well, right? So you're bringing out the best in that person. So how do you coach your brokers to encourage new investing or buying new properties in Southern California when other markets seem like they might be a better fit?
Yeah, this may sound like it's two different angles, because and again, this really depends on the investment strategy of the individual. But if you're looking at trying to kind of sell an individual into invest in the Southern California market, it's arguably the most consistently, it has the most historic and consistent increase in values than I would say probably any market in the country, arguably in the world, right? Historically, you could if you looked at the overall commercial real estate market 20 years ago in Southern California, you could probably have thrown a dart and purchased anything and held on to it, and you'd be doing very well today, right? And you can go back the same 50 or 40 years ago, 50 years ago, right? And where other markets don't have that kind of appreciation and demand, you could be relatively safe. Now, with that safety, you don't get the same returns. Like anything, a return is based on risk. And so if you're looking to chase a higher yield, you're going to have to go into what's considered maybe a more risky market. Now, that could still be a very strong market with fundamentals, but many of the secondary markets or secondary states have better yield. coupled with the uncertainty of the kind of political climate here in California has driven some investors to take a look and chase yields in other states. However, others realize this is a market where there's a ton of diversity and strong population. People want to live here. Businesses want to be here. There's a lot of pros to be here as well. And so I think if you're looking for a safe long-term investment, Southern California, it's hard to beat. But if you're chasing yield or you're looking for expansion of your business and other things, and there's definitely some other states that can be more enticing.
Very true, definitely. So let's talk about COVID for just a second. So how has COVID changed your day-to-day interaction with your brokers? How have you overcome that? Because you're very hands-on. Every time we talk on the phone, you're always on the road to another office or to another client meeting in person with these people. How have you overcome how COVID has changed your day-to-day?
I mean, it's definitely completely shifted how I operate. And to your point, I mean, prior to COVID, in these 10 offices in the region, I was traveling. I'm meeting with brokers, with clients. We're doing breakfast, lunches, and dinners. Speaking at events, you name it. And most of our interaction, it was in person. And that's a lot of my personality is based on that. That's how I build relationships with clients and brokers. And so I kind of thrive off that. And a lot of our brokers thrive off that. And so the challenge has been going from that world where I'm face to face and in meetings and at events and like I said, lunches and dinners and all these things to strictly going to Zoom has been challenging. Now, thankfully, we live in a time that we have the technology to still operate relatively well in this, right? And we can still communicate and connect, and at least visually, virtually. It's pretty incredible because if you think about this, I mean, 15, 20 years ago, if we would have had a similar type of pandemic, it would have completely shut down the economy where we really would have limited access and ability to interact. So thankfully, we live in a time where we have the technologies to do this. I can say just from experience, and this may sound a little bit biased being at Colliers, but I was really impressed. I mean, we rallied as soon as this kind of shutdown occurred, and we were able to get all of our brokers up and operating virtually like very quickly, where they really didn't skip much of a beat during this. And I think others were kind of waiting. There was a lot of uncertainty, a lot of unknown, and our leadership in place just took measures early on, made sure and ensured we had all of our IT and making sure everyone could work remotely and have access to the network and really kind of operate almost not at 99% efficiency, not having that face-to-face. So thankfully, it wasn't that big of a hit. For me personally, what's been challenging is that just going from as opposed to the face-to-face, now I'm just on conference calls and Zoom calls all morning and all day, and working from home for the most part of the beginning of this was there's definitely some pros to that, but the cons were, I mean, you're stuck inside and you're on a conference call all day, and there would be days where, I'd wake up and be on calls from 8 o'clock and I look out the window and it's 8 o'clock at night and I'm still just on a Zoom call, and that can get frustrating and challenging.
It can be tedious after a while. You feel, really, you're just stuck behind the desk all day. It's a little different than what we're used to.
For sure.
Absolutely.
Yep.
So retail and hospitality have been hit really hard with this pandemic that we've had. When do you see those product types bouncing back?
I'll speak to both of them individually. Retail is really interesting, and this is just more of my own kind of perspective and opinion. There's been a lot of, I guess, negative news surrounding retail, but I'm really hot on retail, and I'll share with you for a couple of reasons. And I just think, so I mentioned there's 200 brokers in our region. About half of them are industrial focused, and we'll talk about industrial in a moment. But our number one broker in the region is actually a retail investment sales capital markets broker selling institutional type shopping centers. And he and his team, they're crushing it. Right. And it's not, and it really is. And a lot of the investors looking at this is recognizing that, hey, this may be the opportunity to buy. Right. And it's kind of like a lot of people have investment strategies. Unfortunately, the vast majority of people end up buying industrial property at the hottest time in the market, right? As opposed to, selling at this time and buying at the low. So I think some more savvy investors are looking at retail as an opportunity to buy it at a little bit of a higher cap rate or lower price, per square foot in a moment where there may be some opportunity. But my opinion based on retail is that, like anything, yes, we're seeing a big shift of shoppers and consumers going online and buying e-commerce. However, if you look at commercial real estate historically, anytime there's a shift in those things, and especially in like the retail market, there is going to be a repurposed use for that retail space, especially, I mean, a lot of our retail is in high demand, high traffic, very valuable real estate locations. And whether that shift is in some of the, we've seen the big impact in like big box retail, for example, right? That a lot of these major, huge retailers have gone out of business or gone bankrupt, and you have these huge, large spaces that are vacant, right? I believe, and we're already starting to see this, that there's going to be demand for that space. And whether it's in some cases like an e-commerce taking on that as a distribution center and taking over that space, because again, they need that space. I've seen some retail actually convert into office and or multifamily. Just recognizing again the location. And I also believe many people still want to be in these retail spaces. So if you use I'm talking more of the large kind of regional centers, people like to get out. They want to go to restaurants. They want to be out and about. They like to be interacting. And in some cases, there are certain retail products that people like to feel and see and touch. And those. Now, I think retail leasing is definitely, it's no question, it's taking a big impact, and there's going to be a significant change there. But my feeling long term is all of that's going to be repurposed. I think it's very valuable. If I'm an investor, I would consider getting into retail at this point and in the next coming years. But knowing that there is going to be the vacancy rates are going up, the rates are going down. Sadly, we see a lot of these mom and pop or individual restaurants and other businesses going out of business, and it's unfortunate. And so there's going to be some vacancy, and I think that there's going to be a wave of that coming, coupled with we have this moratorium on evictions. We've had a moratorium on even in collections in some cases. And like anything, there has to be a day of reckoning, right? So landlords have been reasonable, and tenants, and they've been trying to sit down together and negotiate and come up with a reason. But landlords still have to pay their mortgage. They still have to pay their taxes. And there's been, and this is across property types, but even in retail, for example, at some point, there's going to have to be a day of reckoning. So there's going to be some definite shakeup, but like anything in any industry, when there's shakeup, there's opportunity. So retail, there's no question it's going to be challenging in the coming months and coming years, but I think it's an opportunity. If you look long-term from an investment perspective, I think there's going to be a need, and it's going to be repurposed, in my opinion. On the hospitality side, I think it's going to bounce back very strong. I'm sure, I think we can probably take a vote just here on the call. I think everyone is eager to be able to get out and travel again and have some space and get out of the house. And so I think there's, when this does come back, when this vaccine does get kind of, dissipated throughout the population, I think there's going to be a huge influx of travel and hospitality. I think the challenge is, it's kind of like, it's not that you're going to go take 2 vacations to make up for the 2 that you missed. Everyone's going to go on vacation once, right? But so that all the expenses and overhead that have these hospitality industry owners and operators have had to deal with, they're not going to be able to make it all back because everyone's going to be traveling 5 times as much. That may be a challenge, but I think once this kind of opens up, I think the whole hospitality industry and the travel industry and tourism industry is going to see a huge, influx of business. But hopefully they can weather the storm in the interim.
I agree 100%. Oh, definitely. I mean, you take something away from people that they're used to having, and even though they might not use it every day, when you take it away, that makes them want it more. So now, as soon as they're able to get it back, they're going to be flooding the malls and the stores and the supermarkets, and they're going to be flooding the travel agencies. And I honestly think cruises are going to come back with a big bang. People really enjoy that, being able to take that time and do that. I think that'll come back in a huge effect coming around the corner. Definitely.
Discount. I mean, the fact.
So, in your opinion, is there a hot?
Oh, I was going to say real quick. So I don't want to the fact that these operators, they're going to be impacted. They are impacted, and it's really it's sad to see that. It's sad to see that. Well, hopefully, a lot of these proprietors and whether they're hotel proprietors or retail proprietors, they're in a serious situation, and it's scary, right? But I just think I don't want to discount that by any means. I just think from an investment standpoint, this may be a good time to get into those. Whereas generally speaking, when you look at investment trends, you look at what the mass populations do, and there's a lot of kind of savvy investors that say, like, look, find what everyone else is doing, go do the opposite, right? And in this case, if people are bailing out of retail or bailing out of hospitality, in my opinion, that's all going to come back at some point. This COVID impact on the economy is a temporary short setback, not a long-term, impact. And so this may be an opportunity to invest in those product types in the long run.
That kind of answers another question that we kind of had for you was, being in the business for as many years as you have, you've seen the downturn, 08, 09. And now we kind of feel like we're having more national disaster based situation with COVID. So that really answers the question. Definitely temporary, more so than a long-term effect for, type of recession situation.
Yeah.
So I personally, go ahead.
I was just going to say just more from a brokerage perspective on that, kind of on the impact of in this economy is, it's interesting. Like if you compare it to the last recession, which they're for different reasons, we're in a recession, right? But if you look at how brokers operate, it was interesting. I mean, it was very similar to 2005 and 6. And it's the same today. We have a lot of real estate licensees in the state of California, right? There's probably 500,000, right? And for the most part, even before the last recession, people could make money in this business on the brokerage side, right? People were selling homes and buying homes. There was obviously incredible loan terms and rates at that point that people were able to get into homes. And so there was a lot of activity there and a lot of people were getting into the business. Same on the commercial side, the last 10 years have been this incredible economy, a lot of people getting into the business. And fortunately or unfortunately, when the last recession hit, there was kind of a true up, or we saw people, this is when it was either a make or break. And we had some people take off and have very successful careers amongst that during that recession. And a lot of people bailed out of the business, and a lot of people that candidly probably had no business being in the business. They weren't career brokers, right? At the beginning of this pandemic, and I remember I shared this with all of our brokers. We were all on a call virtually, and just it was kind of more of a reflection comparing it to the last recession, was where I saw brokers thrive in the last recession. In fact, I saw brokers, some of them had their best years ever in that recession, were brokers that pivoted their business, recognizing that because the economy's been so great and everything's been kind of moving and humming along, there's been certain players in this space, certain tenants, certain landlords, certain investors operating. Now all of a sudden there's a big shift in the economy. It doesn't mean nothing's going to happen. As a broker, you want this activity, you like the volatility, right? Change and opportunity. Where brokers failed, in my opinion, is that they kept trying to do business the same way, working with the same people that were now impacted by COVID in this example and not able to operate. And because they weren't going out and trying to find new prospective clients in the marketplace, they died on the vine and got out of the business. The brokers that were able to adapt and shift and recognize that there's still demand. And even on the office side, there's a ton of subleasing going on, right? Even on the retail side, there's different players at the table. If you don't shift your business and go after those different players, then you're going to be dead. And then a broker may blame it on the economy. The opportunities are there. It's just reshifting or adapting your business to it. There's a different set of players on the field now in this market, right? There's different buyers, there's different sellers, there's different landlords and tenants coming into this market or getting out of this market, downsizing or expanding because of all the impact. They're not the same players that were on the field 2 years ago. And if you're just trying to interact with those existing clients that you had then you're probably not, you're going to be starving. If you want to be successful, you have to adapt. But recognizing it's not that nobody's doing anything. I think sometimes that's a sentiment, because initially everything was on pause. There was a little bit of a pause in the beginning, I think, across the board, but it's not that people aren't doing anything or not transacting. There's a lot of transactions. Like I said, whether they're downsizing, whether they're selling, whether they have to get out, whether they're buying or purchasing, there's just a different set of players. And so the individuals that were able to adapt in this, and I can look at our brokers and say we've had some that have had some of their best years ever across property types in the market. When someone would say, oh my gosh, how do they do that? And it was just as simple as they just recognize there's going to be different players in the field. Anyway, that was another long answer. Sorry.
That's great. No, we enjoy the insight. Thank you very much. We appreciate that. So we have just about 3 more questions that I want to get to for sure. I know we're running long on time. So the Inland Empire, really, people see that as the land of opportunity. So how do you see the Inland Empire market growth-wise in the next 10 years? And then do you think that the areas of the Mojave River Valley and the Coachella Valley will really catch up to the core growth area in the Inland Empire?
So yeah, I guess good question. I mean, thankfully, again, the Inland Empire sits geographically in a location that makes it the hottest industrial market in the country. And industrial, and if you look at all the different product types, is really a fundamental driver to jobs. And the good thing about that is with jobs comes all the other property types. So industrial is driving jobs, and those create need for office. Those people moving here and working here need a place to live, so it drives residential. And then you've got, those people want to go out and be entertained, eat at restaurants, and so there's the retail component as well. So industrial is always a huge kind of the fundamental driving factor to an economy and the rest of the commercial real estate products. And looking like, I mean, the trajectory and the demand for industrial space, specifically in the Empire, because geographically that's really kind of the last bastion of available land in Southern California, and where it sits strategically, like I mentioned earlier, with all the interstates and the proximity to the ports. And then you infuse that with a steroid shot of everyone's demand for consumer goods and e-commerce. It's projected for the next 10 years that the demand for commercial real estate, the supply for industrial in the Inland Empire, I don't even know it's going to be able to catch up. I mean, I know developers are trying to work with different cities, but you look at that and kind of to your question about in the Coachella Valley and also in the high desert, what the demand is. I mean, I look at cities now that weren't even in discussion. You got cities like Yucaipa and Beaumont and Banning, let alone even further out in, the Coachella Valley and Cathedral City and cities like that, where, I mean, a lot of our brokers, a lot of our clients are sitting down with the city and they're breaking ground on huge 500,000 square feet plus industrial space that really wasn't even we don't even know what those towns were 15, 20 years ago from an industrial standpoint. And like I was just saying, that's just going to drive further growth, and it's going to across property types. So from what we can see from an industrial, impact on all those regions within the Inland Empire, I don't see it going the other way anytime soon. In fact, the demand's like through the roof, and it's projected for the next 10 years. So I think it makes sense to continue to look out there, I guess, again, from an investment standpoint.
I worry sometimes that we're going to overbuild too much industrial. I just look back from the recession we had 08, 09, and we built a ton of industrial. And then you saw these buildings sit vacant for 3 or 4 years because they're really, we didn't have any goods to put in them. Now everybody's buying everything online. And what happens when people decide they want to go out? Like you said, they want to go back to retail stores. They want to be able to go out and physically touch something before they buy it and it's delivered to their home. Is that going to hurt the amount of industrial that we're building? I mean, are we going to have an overage, I guess is my question. I mean, you just said that we can't build too much. I mean, we have this huge amount that we need to build based upon the number of people we have and the consumer goods coming into the country. But I just worry that at some point it's not going to even out.
I guess backing up, if you look even before the COVID pandemic, the e-commerce demand was already going through the roof, right? And that's the trend that's changed. I mean, it's really changed how we purchase consumer goods, right? And how we interact and everything else. And so the demand even before COVID was already through the roof for industrial space because of all the online shopping and e-commerce, right? And we've seen that trend. And I don't think that's just a short-term trend. I think that's really more of where people like to have their goods delivered to their house in 24 hours. They can do it from the comfort of their home. I don't think that's a trend that's going to go away anytime soon. And so I think, that demand for that isn't going anywhere. The COVID environment's only significantly increased that just because we were forced to be at home. We can't go out and interact as much. And so we've seen that significant increase, but the demand was already there even before COVID, right? The trends of industrial space in the Inland Empire for the last 10 years has only gone up over and over again. So I still feel like even we get past the COVID environment, all that, and then it's also because we've been so much shopping online now, so we're comfortable with, we're more familiar with it. I don't see that going away. So I don't think, and we were building a lot of the industrial space in the lab before the last recession there was construction going on, a lot of new development going on, a lot of housing markets, all those things. And then there was all the owner users and manufacturers. That was kind of the bigger part of the industrial economy in the Inland Empire 20 years ago. Well, now it's all shifted to mostly e-commerce. So that's where the big demand's coming from. So it's almost like you have a whole nother player. You still have those owner users, you still have those manufacturers, you still have other types of industrial space, but now we have a whole nother player, and it's a huge player, right? If you call it the Amazon effect, mean, it's like a monster player that's just been added into that. So it's only kind of fueled that fire, so to speak, in my opinion.
So last question for you, and then we're going to open it up to other two questions from the group. So basically, what is your best advice you can give to someone who's coming into our commercial real estate industry right now?
Work hard. It's a good question. I think, so it's a lot of times I'll have new brokers that are getting into the business ask me like, what property type should I go on, right? And obviously, again, I've reiterated how I think we all know how hot the industrial market is, but that doesn't mean you're going to go out there and be successful. There's a lot. Every product type is extremely competitive, right? There's a lot of competition, arguably more so than ever across property types, and there's opportunity in all those to be successful. So I think the winning formula in that is having the right mentorship, having the right training. But I think the biggest variable in all of that, because I've seen new brokers come in and have a great mentor, a great senior, a great system, teach them how to do it, and they fail. And it's the biggest unknown is the work ethic. Candidly, if I can teach a broker, I can teach someone how to go out there and make money in the business, but I can't force them to pick up the phone and go interact with clients. And I can teach them what to say and how to understand the business. But work ethic and drive, and recognizing that, like so many things, it's not going to happen overnight. It's really, you have to come in, and it's a career decision. It's going to take a long time to build up that book of business. And thankfully, it's a business that has a potential to provide a great lifestyle, and I think a lot of people are initially attracted to that because they see a lot of potential, money being made in this business. And it's true for some, but it's true for those that have worked very hard. And so I use the industrial market in the Inland Empire as an example. So I have some brokers that have been in that market doing industrial for 30 plus years. And 30 years ago, it was not the same market, even anywhere near, right? And there wasn't demand out there, but they've worked out there when no one wanted to go out there 30 years ago. And these guys were working from LA, working out in the Inland Empire, focused on industrial. There wasn't a ton of competition out there. They built a great brand for themselves, and they built relationships over 30 years. Well, thankfully, that investment for them has now paid off. And there are honestly the top brokers in this space in the country, and they're crushing it from a financial standpoint. But I say that because some new broker might come in and say, oh, I'm going to go do industrial in the Inland Empire. And they don't realize that broker's taken 30 years to get there. And if you think you're going to come in just because it's in a hot product type and a hot market and come in and do that, it's just not going to happen. And unfortunately, I think that's sometimes the mindset of people, like the brokers that are doing great business in any product type in any industry are those that have dug in, built relationships long-term, and it's in some cases taken 20, 30 years to really kind of pay off. So anyway.
A work ethic. You cannot teach someone that. They have it or they don't. And that is so true. And I have seen you preach that to so many people in a room and in a meeting when you're training. So very, very good information today. So I'll share some fun facts about Cody that he was willing to share with us today. So he has the two most adorable children. They should be like poster kids for the Gap. They're just adorable. Surfing and snowboarding are his biggest hobbies. If he's not doing one, it's the other. So thank goodness it's California where you can do both. He's lived in Puerto Rico for 2 years, and he is fluent in Spanish. So I'm going to use that when I need to go back to the barn and, talk to the guys at the office down there. So definitely. So we're going to open it up to Q&A. I know that Joe has has a question already in the chat box for you. So do you envision repurposed multifamily buildings for e-commerce, or are developers looking for raw land upon which to build?
Both. I mean, we're already starting to see. In fact, I had somebody actually, one of our brokers in Salt Lake City actually reached out to me and was asking for some examples of this, if we've seen some existing retail or even office spaces throughout Southern California being repurposed. And yes, the answer is yes, we've already seen it. We've already seen both retail and office properties being repurposed for multifamily. And then a bit on the retail, I've also seen some big boxes being reconverted into e-commerce or distribution centers for e-commerce. Amazon's taken over some kind of vacant, recently bankrupted big box retailers, and they've taken in that space. I mean, the Amazon's in such demand of distribution space, it's crazy. And Amazon's not the only one, but that's the biggest and most well-known. But many e-commerce companies they're looking for space, especially in even stronger infill markets in LA and in Orange County, where there is no available space, but they have a ton of customers they need to get stuff delivered to, and so they need distribution space. So they may take over a vacant office building, a vacant retail space, just because they're in such demand. So yeah, we have seen it across those property types.
So another question for you that we have, so financing, how much is that a part of really what's happening right now? Is it as hard to come by as people are saying? What are you seeing?
I don't think so. Just on the surface, and I'll say there's a couple reasons why. I mean, obviously interest rates are at the lowest they've ever been in the history of the planet, and that's no exaggeration. It's pretty incredible. And a lot of the terms, there's a lot of banks and investors that are cash rich, candidly, because of the economy over the last 10 years, and they need to place that money somewhere, and they can place it at a low return. And so I think there's a lot of available financing. Now, that being said, like anything, banks are always they're loaning out based on risk, right? And so they're taking a look at what's the next 12 months, 24 months look like, what does this environment look like, what's the vacancy factors, all those things. And every deal is going to be a little bit different. Everything is a little bit, specific to those things. But for the most part, I've seen that there is a lot of available financing still available, and lenders are willing to get a little bit creative knowing that, and they need to lend. So I think there's a lot of finance and lending options still available.
That's good to hear, because that's not what we hear a lot of times on the outside of your world looking in. I mean, it's constantly, oh, I need financing, or I can't get financing, this deal's going to fall apart, that kind of thing. So interesting. Does anyone else have any other questions?
I was going to say, it's also going to be based upon how liquid and how big of a down payment you're putting down, the asset. Every deal is going to be a little bit different, but generally speaking, I mean, we have our head of debt for the West Coast, sits out of our Phoenix office, very well versed. I do a call with him every other week, and just kind of getting updates of what he's seeing on the front lines and what banks are lending and what opportunities are out there. And there's still some really favorable financing options out there right now.
That is really good to hear. Well, Cody, you have been so generous today with your time. We appreciate it very much. I know we usually keep this to a half an hour, and we went a little bit over today. So thank you very much. We appreciate your support for Crew Inland Empire and what you do for our chapter. And thank you for being here with us today. Everyone have a great week, and we look forward to seeing you all soon at an in-person event, we hope, in 2021. Take care.